Hi PyCon. Hi PyCon Africa. A day has only 24 plus or minus 1 hour, and I have less than 30 minutes to speak about that. What are we going to speak about today? We are going to see how to check the current time in Python, that you shouldn't check the current time too often, and that you should check what your government does. My name is Miroslav Šedivý. I was born in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia, which is the time zone of Bratislava. Studied in Lyon in France, which is the time zone of your Paris, and now I'm working in Karlsruhe in Germany, which is the time zone of your Berlin. I have spent my whole life in the single Central European time zone, and still there are so many time zones out there that we are going to speak about today. So now it's Saturday, the 8th of August 2020. In Ghana, in Accra, it's 9 in the morning. In Nigeria, it's 10 in the morning, and it's 11 in Zimbabwe, and here in Karlsruhe, we are shortly before noon, and it's already noon in Nairobi, in Kenya. So how we are going to see, can we check what the current time is? In Python, if you import the standard libraries module datetime, you ask for datetime now, and then you will get this datetime object that has all the information, but it looks like this if you started in Accra. It looks like this if you started in Lagos. In Harare and Karlsruhe it looks like this, and in Nairobi it looks like this. So you get 4 different objects, and if you calculate the difference between them, it will be always 1 hour step, even if you do it at the same time. So you cannot compare really the objects with each other. If your server is set to UTC, you will get the same as in Accra, so 9 a.m. So how can we get the same time on each computer? You can ask for UTC now. So actually you should never use datetime now as it is written there, because it is depends on your time zone, and not and the information which time zone is it in is not there. If you ask for UTC now, you will get the current UTC time, and it will always be the same on every computer. If you want to have the information that you are actually in UTC, you can ask for now, and with the datetimes time zone UTC time zone information. But if you want to have the current time somewhere else, then we have to define our offset. So if we know we are 1 hour ahead of UTC, we can ask for the current time in the time zone that is 1 hour ahead. But there are countries where you don't know which offset you are currently in, because there is something like daylight saving time. So, for example, in Lagos, if you want to know the current time in Lagos or in the region of Nigeria, you can use the third-party library pytz, and then ask for the current time in Lagos, and then the right information will be there. If you don't want the current time, but you want to change or give the information about the time zone to some other datetime object, for example, you have this naive, so that time zone naive datetime with in Lagos, so you are 10 a.m. and you want to say, that's Lagos, so I want to convert it to other time zones. Never do replace, because if you do this, you will get a datetime object that has in the TZ info has Africa Lagos LNT plus 14 minutes. What's that? We are going to see what's that, but this is wrong. This is not what you want. When you are using pytz, always localize. So use the Africa Lagos time zone object and then localize, and then you will get the current time or the time, and with the West African time 1 hour ahead of UTC. If you are using the TZ module from dateutil for the third-party library, you can replace. It works a little bit differently. pytz is unfortunately not standard. Even better, if you are using Python 3.9 or newer, there is the zone info module that uses the time zone database from the standard library, and that will give you the current information, and you can do everything with that directly from the standard Python. Okay, so now imagine that what we want to do. Let's have an example. Let's say we want 2 strings with the current date and with the current date of the week, and then you do something like this. This will work until it doesn't work. It will break at one moment when you are probably not sitting in front of your computer. Imagine that these two lines you start them 1 microsecond before midnight of a UTC. So the first line executes 1 microsecond before midnight and the second one after midnight, and you will get 2 different dates. So never look twice at your watch, always look only once, store it in a variable and then work with this variable. So check for the current time only once. There is an exception when you want to check for the current time several times, and that's exactly when you want to measure some expensive operations. So for example, a download, you want to measure how long time it did. What you can do, you can check the current time at the beginning and then at the end, and then calculate the difference. You get a time delta object, and total seconds will give you the seconds. There is a nice tip, you can divide the time delta objects, and then you will get directly the float, so the number 1 second in this case. But datetime is a little bit overkill. You can always use time, because it gives you directly the number as float, and the number of seconds since epoch, so since 1970, and you can calculate the difference between 2 floats. That's easy, but what can happen is that, for example, if during this expensive operation your computer clock will be set to the correct time because it was wrong before, and the NTP server adjusted the clock, and then it can even happen that end happens before start, so you get a negative elapsed. In that case, use time monotonic, that will give you guaranteed always monotonic increasing number in seconds since some time in the history, which is not important because you only need the difference, or if you can get it even in nanoseconds. So that was Python and measuring time. Now let's have a look at time zones. How could you measure time? You just look where is the sun, you get the highest position, that's noon, and then until the next noon you divide it by 24, you get the number of hours, and you're done. That's wrong, because the sun and the earth, they don't rotate regularly, and there is something called like time equation. It means that every day, depending on your latitude, every day the sun's noon is moved by a little bit. During a year it can be up to 15 minutes. This is where this concept of mean time comes from, so the mean noon, when you calculate the noon. So there was local time, but then there came a railroad, and you didn't want to send 2 trains at the same time on the same track from both sides. There could be an accident. So there were local times or regional times of the countries, and the Greenwich Mean Time was the one that was then later used all around the world. It took some time, but they put it, and actually this comes from Europe. This is how the time zones looked like at the beginning, but with many political decisions they changed, and now, for example, the whole France and Spain, huge countries in the West, are using the same time as we in the Central Europe, the red one. If you install the third-party library pytz, and you ask how many time zones are there, there are over 400 time zones. So you would think that there is Greenwich and plus 12, minus 12, something like 25 time zones in the world. No, there are many more like that. This is based on the fact that every country has its own time zone, even if 2 neighboring countries use the same time. And you have to take into account all changes of the time, all daylight saving time movement between 2 time zones in the history since 1970. So these 440 time zones, here are they, represent countries and different time zone concepts since 1970. You see here, the same color is the same time, same clock now. So you see that the most of Europe is blue, and it is the same as more of the western, more of the eastern Africa. So like Zimbabwe and South Africa. This is Sudan. This is because in Europe we are currently at the daylight saving time, so we are 1 hour ahead. The same with the yellow color with Western Europe and Central Africa. Where does this information come from? There is no organization that decides about time zone. Every government does it themselves. And there is one organization that tries to collect all the information, and on this website you will find 2 things. There is a mailing list, very active mailing list, where people write, oh, there is some new information about time zone, something has changed, In the history current, there is our government that wants to introduce daylight saving time, that wants to move, to stop, do something like that. And there is an archive that is released several times a year. 2020 is quite peaceful. There are not so many changes. Until now there was only one version, 2020A. The next one would be B. And if you download this file, you will find some awk shell Perl script, but the most interesting information is in the files called Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, and so on. And there are two things in these files. So for example, look at Africa, 60 kilobytes. There is some code, the information, something like CSV file, with the information about all the changes of all time zones in Africa. And there are the comments that explain why it was done like that. If there is one image that you want to take from this talk, take this one. This is the history of all 440 time zones around the world in the past over 120 years, plus the future of the next 18 or 20 years. On the x-axis, you see the years. And on the y-axis, it is the UTC offset. So 0 is Greenwich, or most of Africa. To the top, there is a direction of east, so there is Asia and Australia, and bottom -5 and so on. This is America. So what you see at the beginning, before 19, there are 100. All the countries they are quite wild, because this is the local mean time of the respective time zone, so offset by minutes or seconds. And then it tries to concentrate on those 24 plus or minus time zones with some half an hour or quarter an hour offsets. The small ticks that you see, this is daylight saving time, which is important that you see this daylight saving time all around the world also in the future until 2038. It means with the current version of PyTz or TZ info, your program will switch to the daylight saving time in those countries where it is currently valid in the future. If, for example, European Union wanted to abolish daylight saving time in the following 2-3 years, if that happens, the new version would reflect that, but your old version or this version, if you test it, put it into Docker virtual and then think, okay, it works, then it may show wrong time. And there are a few ticks or a few lines, vertical lines through the whole chart. These are some islands in the Pacific that switched the whole day, jumped the whole day because they moved from extreme east to extreme west or vice versa. This is an except for Africa. So you see that there is not so much of daylight saving time. These are mostly the countries in the north and in the south. Of course, around the equator you don't need daylight saving time, although there was daylight saving time. So for example, you see in the 20s and 30s there are small ticks, but they are only like 20 minutes at all. This is Ghana in the 20s and 30s and 40s because the government decided that people should have between September and December to get 20 minutes of more daylight after their work. In some other countries it looks even wilder. So let's have a look at this file, what's there in it. So the most the simplest example is here, Ivory Coast, Abidjan. There are only 2 lines. The first one says that the local mean time valid until 1912 was 16 minutes and 8 seconds behind UTC, and since then Ivory Coast is on GMT, so 0 minutes, 0 hours ahead of UTC, so the same time. Important thing is that this local mean time, 16 minutes, 8 seconds, was local for Abidjan. So all the countries or the cities around, they had, of course, a different local mean time, so you shouldn't rely on that. Actually, never rely on the information for any place before 1970, because, of course, the local mean time was different in every place. To make it simpler, there are many more countries in that region that are just aliases for Abidjan. So Mali, Gambia, Guinea, and so on. All these countries, if you ask for the current time or for the historical time, in those countries, it will be the same as in Abidjan. So these are just symbolical links. Why is Ghana not there? As I said, in the 20s, 30s, until 1942, between September and December, they were 20 minutes ahead of UTC. So the format is a little bit different here. Let's move a little bit to the east. Lagos, the same until 1919, they were 30 minutes, 36 seconds ahead of UTC. Now, then they moved to 1 hour ahead of UTC. And again, plenty of other countries that are using the same time zone information. Maputo, this is Mozambique, 2 hours ahead of UTC, the same, and again, several countries that are in the same time zone. Nairobi, this was a little bit more complicated, so you see in the 30s, 40s, 50s, there were 2 hours and 30 minutes, 245 minutes ahead of UTC. Yeah. And again, plenty of countries that are in the same time zone. Where it is a little bit more complicated, this is Algeria. You see that every year they decided about the daylight saving time, that it started or ended at a different date. So this gets a little bit more complicated. You have to get all the information, and in the file you will also find all the links to all newspaper articles that describe what happened in the 40s, 70s, 80s. So that was Algeria. Morocco, these are only the last few lines of Morocco. You see that due to Ramadan month, which moves every year, they decided that they are going to use daylight saving time during Ramadan for up to 2087. So far, far, far future. And in the comment you see that assume that Morocco will no longer observe the EST after 2097. At some point this table will need to be extended, though quite possibly Morocco will change the rules first. I'm sorry, 2087, that's not my problem anymore. So this is an overview of all 52 time zones in Africa in the past 50 years. And on the y-axis you see numbers between 0 and 12, and this is actually at every day number of, or the total offset of all these countries. So you see every year there is something like this, which means daylight saving time, but you see that these switches are not regular, there are always some tiny steps, and these steps means that there were different countries that started daylight saving time at a different moment. Where there are very narrow jumps, these are very probably the Ramadan months in Northern Africa. If you see, we are speaking about daylight saving time. In many countries it is called summertime on the north half, northern hemisphere. For the winter, in winter we use standard time. We never call it winter time, although some people do that. Actually, winter time, there was winter time only once in the history in one country, and that was Czechoslovakia in 1946-47. This is the law or the decree of the government that says that was declared on the 27th of November 46, that from the 1st of December 46 until the 23rd of February 47, the time should move backwards by even more 1 hour. So there was, in summer we were 1 hour ahead, then October, November we were our normal time, standard time, and then December, January, February we were another hour back. So actually in summer there was daylight saving time. This looks like a daylight wasting time. This happened only once, never again, but the decree is valid and the law is valid, and actually the Czech and the Slovak governments, they are allowed to declare winter time or daylight wasting time at any time. But of course in Europe we usually have, all countries have the same rules for daylight saving time. But you see, this was declared on the 27th of November, so only 3 or 4 days ahead. That's too late. If there is a change, you should always give this information to TZ Data soon enough, at least 1 year, because what you need is to put it into the new version and new release, and then from this file, everything, all the information about time zones on your computer, doesn't matter whether it is Python, database systems, calendars, Android, iPhone, and then all the systems, even embedded systems, like airports, plenty of systems, they are going to use that. So you should inform, your government should inform about this ahead, really ahead, in advance. because let's have a look at some examples. There is Istanbul, Europe Istanbul or Asia Istanbul. These cities on both continents. Their entries, they look like this, and you see in the 2011, 14, 15, there are some changes, although Turkey usually uses the same daylight saving time rules as the rest of Europe. And the comments say that Turkey will change into summer time zone on March 28th instead of March 27th. So 2 weeks before, they just decided that because of some nationwide exam on Sunday, they are going to move to the daylight saving time on 1 day later. That's a complete chaos. You don't want to do that. Don't do that, please. 2014, they didn't learn nothing because of some Turkish local election. Again, they moved the clocks forward 1 day later. Again, and again. And even some changes were announced, but then they were took back. So in the code, you see nothing. And in the comments, you see, oh, we are going to change, we are not going to change. Caracas, again, this is in Venezuela, Southern America. On 15th of April, they informed that they are going to advance 30 minutes on the 1st of May. 2 weeks ahead, that's late. And then you'll see some information, some URL from Reuters or from Official Gazette. So there is a link to some Spanish-speaking newspaper that informs about that. Port-au-Prince, this is Haiti. In the past 10 years, also they decide, are we going to start daylight saving time or not, and then change it there and there. That's really complicated. Seoul and Pyongyang, this is South Korea and North Korea. South Korea in the 40s, 50s, they turned back half an hour, but it was only internal because all the external services like meteorology, Navy, airports, and so on, telecommunications, they kept the old time. So during the 50s, South Korea had a different time zone when communicated to the exterior and interior. Pyongyang, that's South Korea, they changed the time in 2015, and then again 2018 they changed it back. And there is a link. It appears to be the front page story at the top of the rightmost column. So actually it is also a link to some Korean newspaper with the information. We are going to change the time tomorrow or in 2 weeks. That's too late. So you see, download this file, have a look at this. About Africa, you will also learn quite interesting things about your country, about the history, why it was like that. So please don't invent your own time zones. And don't hardcore any rules, especially about daylight saving time. So, for example, it is the last Sunday of March, the last Sunday of October. No, don't do that. Keep your time zones lips up to date because there are many changes every year. Follow your government's intentions to modify your time zone and then inform the mailing list, and your post may appear here, and a future me or someone else is going to speak about it. And if you can, avoid the time zones at all. That's all. Thank you very much.